So, I'm still waking up, hence the coffee. But hello! I thought that I would give you some comparisons, or more of like buy this, not that, for some of the palettes that I've used over the past couple of weeks in my like weekly palette review Shop My Stash. Now, if you recall, many of the palettes are ones where I had to build up the pigment or build up the shade, eyeshadow shade on my skin tone, just because I'm a deeper skin tone. And sometimes you don't want to do that. You don't have the time for it. You just don't want to bother. And so I have some like alternatives to the ones that I mentioned in that previous video. Now, I am about to like work out, and then I will do nothing the rest of the day. So I thought that I would get some of this done before I go exercise. And yeah, so I'm not going to be on camera. We're going to see how this goes. I'm just going to use my vanity here. Let me wipe it off. Don't come for me, okay? I use my vanity and show you the palettes. Now, for the palettes, what I tended to do was to kind of take the overall color story or color theme and try to find other shades or other palettes that have richer pigment to use instead. So, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here I am. Don't come for me if my hands are ashy, okay? Anyway, so I have the fan on in the background because, as per usual, it's hotter than fish grease. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first palette I wanted to start with is the Kaleidos Lunar Lavender palette. Now, although I did not use this one specifically in the video when I talked about my Kaleidos palettes, I swatched a bit of it, and it performs the same way as the other Kaleidos palettes. So this has a really pretty lavender color story that you can see here. Oop, there we go. And if you remember, it has this little thing. So these are really, really pretty. Unfortunately, when I put them on my eyes, because of my deeper skin tone, like the shades just don't show up as well. And so, yeah, I decided, well, let me see if I have some other palettes that I would get a bit more use out of. So, the first one I thought of, oh, hey, Rosé, what you doing? What you doing? Girl. The first one, Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde. Now, when I initially used this palette, it wasn't and still isn't my favorite, though many people have this as a favorite of theirs. I will say that most of the people that I find who are like, oh my god, I love this palette, they are of a lighter skin tone, at least of the reviews and such that I have watched. But I would still choose this one over the Lunar Lavender from Kaleidos, mainly because the mattes are like a little bit deeper, and so I don't have to put too much elbow grease behind it. Where does that come from, elbow grease? That actually sounds like problematic, but I don't know. Anyway, and these shimmers can be a little tricky as well, but honestly, I would still go with this palette over the Lunar Lavender. Now, it's not a one-to-one comparison where you have this shade, so you definitely have this shade, but I would say that this has the same color story, just expanded. Like, of course, the Lunar Lavender has 6 shades, and this has 18. And so definitely you get more shades, you get different shades, you also have that ability to create different looks. But if you were to stick like sort of here with your purples there, you've also got some shimmers that you can mix and some more of like topper shades. I think that you could really get some similar looks, or at least some looks that are going to show up a bit better on deeper skin tones. The next palette I thought would be a good choice is the Natasha Denona Lila palette. Now listen, I hear so many people call it Lila, but if somebody came to me and they said their name was spelled L-I-L-A, I would call them Lila. but I don't know, okay? So this palette is just like a purple palette. Now, even though some of the shades look like they are more like pinky or bluish, I feel like every shade still has a purple undertone and sort of like a lavender look. So of course, this is much deeper than the Lunar Lavender, and again, you have more shades. The Lunar Lavender has 6. And how much do these have? 15? 5, 10, 15. Yeah. This one has 15. So again, you are getting more shades, so you can branch out a bit more outside of just those pale purples. And this is of a deeper tone. So when I looked back at the color, or I'm sorry, the eyeshadow look I did with this, like the colors really pop and you can see all of them on my skin tone. And so I would definitely choose this one over the Lunar Lavender. For both of these palettes, girl, wait for a sale, okay? You know I like a good sale. The last one I thought, if you were wanting a smaller palette, is the mini Lila / Lila. And this one was, I believe, the first mini palette that I bought from Natasha Denona. Now, the mini palettes are generally $25, but this has gone on sale often at Sephora, and that's how I bought it. Y'all know I like a good sale. So, again, this isn't like a one-to-one comparison with the Lunar Lavender palette, but the shades are richer. You get 5 shades instead of 6, but you also get some like golds, and you get that sort of tannish brown that Kaleidos likes to put in their palettes, and then you have these purples. Now, I find that some people struggle with this palette. I think sometimes they find some of the colors patchy, some of the mattes especially. I haven't had that experience. Like, this works pretty well for me and I like it. And when I do a look with this, I do notice that things just pop. Last night I spent time like pulling all of these palettes, and so there are palettes everywhere. Okay, but this next one is, I guess I'll just do all the Kaleidos ones first. This one is the Sashimi City palette. And if you watched my video, you know this is the one that I struggled with. Like, it doesn't like me. Like, we don't go together. The main thing that I struggled with was this like gorgeous shimmer shade right here. So this shade can be hard to find. It's super pretty. It reminds me of like Pat McGrath special shades, but I was like, okay, it may be special, but it's not special to me because it don't work, right? So again, I went to my Natasha Denona, and I found pretty much a neutral palette, which honestly is what Sashimi City is. It's a very neutral palette. Now, this is one of her larger 5 pans. This is the Camel palette. Guess how I got it? I got it on sale. And it has these very like taupey, cool toned colors in it. It has 2 shimmers that are great like on their own or over the mattes. And so I thought if you were looking for like the neutral tones in the Sashimi City, I really think that this Natasha Denona palette is going to cover it. Like, pretty much all of the matte shades are represented in the Natasha palette, as well as like that tan shade. You've got your shimmers here. The one shade that you are missing is this really pretty shifty color here. And in my opinion, the best thing to do to get that color or something similar is to get some single shadows. And I will show you a couple throughout this video. The other one that I think gives you the good, you know, neutral palette with some nice shimmers is the Natasha Denona Nude palette. Now, this is 5 shades, and Natasha Denona, she's just doing it for me, I guess. I need to be an ambassador or something. I find that these shades show up really well on my skin tone. Initially, I was like, nude. I'm always questioning when something says nude, because nude for brands isn't always nude for me, right? But this one actually does really show up. It has some great pigment. This is a really nice, like, go-to, throw in your bag if you need to go on the go eyeshadow palette that you can use. You can use your fingers, you can use a brush. So yeah, I thought that this one is perfect. Now I know we didn't get to the that shimmer shade, but there are going to be some shimmers that I show you that are single shadows in some palettes, magnetic palettes. So just hold on and we will get there. Rose is under my chair. She be catching me unawares. I had no idea that child was under the chair, but she's not a child, she's a cat, just in case you were wondering. Okay, I took a break to actually work out, so I'm a little sweaty, but I figured I would do this and then be done. Or finish this video up and then be done for the day. So the palette that is next on the Going to My Cousin block is the Cyber Bronze palette from Kaleidos. So I'm getting all of the Kaleidos shadows out of the way. So for this palette, I wasn't able, I don't think, to necessarily find a palette that had the entire color story, but what I did was just kind of focused on different colors within this palette, because I feel like these shades here, you probably have something close to this. I know that I do, just in terms of if you have any sort of neutral palette, you probably have that. So I was focusing a bit more on this bright kind of shimmer shade here, and not so much on these two, because I also felt like these come, I'm pretty sure I could find another like silver shimmer or even this sort of bronzy shimmer, and so I was just like, maybe I can find this one. So let me show you the ones that I thought would compare. That there. So the first one is the Mini Sunset palette from Natasha Denona. I know, I didn't realize Natasha was getting like, I didn't know she was my BFF, but she's all up and through this video. But this shade here, I thought this was like relatively close. And what I like about this Mini Sunset palette, again, all of the shades show up and are very pigmented on my skin tone. So let me actually open this one back up. So if you look here, there's some like resemblance, not a one-to-one, but I think you can make it work. So that is one. Let's see. I also then went into the Sunrise palette. So we've got the Mini Sunset and then you've got the Sunrise. And again, I think some of the like reddish bronzy shimmers would be this one here, maybe even this one here, maybe even mixing them to get that color that you're looking for. But I thought that this would be a good option as well. Now, you honestly cannot get away from sort of a bronzy palette without talking about Pat McGrath. This is the Bronze Seduction palette, and the color that I think is an excellent dupe or alternative is this color here. This is sort of the shade in the palette that is just loved by many. And the nice thing is that a lot of the rest of the shades are neutrals, which is very similar to this Cyber Bronze palette. So you've got some neutrals in there, although they're different from the Cyber Bronze. I think that these are more pigmented and are going to show up super well. They're also going to last on the eye, and Pat McGrath shadows are just amazing. So there's that. The other one from PMG that I thought would be a good one is the Iconic Illumination Quad. Is that the name of it? Yeah. And I found that this one has sort of that bronzy shade as well. So if you're really looking for that bronze shade, which I kind of feels like the reddish bronze shade is the standout in that palette, I think you can find it in other palettes that you might have. Okay, so I just put those to the side. Now I'm going to go into my Sigma palettes, which were the most recent ones that I talked about. This one is my favorite Sigma palette out of the 4 that I have. It's the Corda Rosa palette. What I really like about it is basically just the color story. Lots of golds and pinky purples, mauves, browns. It's just really something that I like in terms of a color story. So I knew that I would have a ton of palettes that would potentially give me the same look, and also some more Natasha Denona. So I've got this one here, which is the mini Zendo palette, and I find that it has some of those pinky shades, but more kind of metallic, that I really like. Let's see. Take that brush out. So here is that palette. So as you can see, you know, just a different option for you rather than this one. If you're looking for like this gold shade, you can definitely find that in other palettes, especially in Natasha Denona's palettes. But also there is another single shadow from JD Glow. This one's called Goldilocks, and this one is a really pretty gold. So there is that. I'm not even sure if you haven't tried JD Glow, like, you need to. Look at that, child. Come on, compared to, hold on. Come on. Come on. Now this one has its place in time, but I'm gonna go with this one. The one that I thought maybe most closely aligned or kind of represented the Corda Rosa is the Coral palette from Natasha Denona. So again, it has those same shades, those corally, pinky shades. It also has this really pretty shimmer here. So let's go with the Enchanted. Now this is another Sigma palette. It's the first like larger palette they came out with. Now this is a palette that isn't a color story that I tend to, so I did find that it was a bit more difficult to find shades or palettes that kind of represented this color story or like a dark skin appropriate tone. But the one that I thought I would go with over this one is the Sydney Grace, good Lord, Sydney Grace Enduring Love palette, and this is the deep version. So if you have this palette or you've heard about it or seen reviews, there is a light version and there is a deep version. And the mattes in the deep version, as well as this shade here, Romeo, those are of a deeper skin tone, or I'm sorry, those are of a deeper pigment, deeper tone, so they show up much better and are more appropriate and easier to work with on darker skin tones. So it is different, I will say that. They are not, again, like one-to-one dupes. But I do feel like there's some similarity enough where I could get that kind of cooler toned look that I want. If I were sticking to like this side of the palette, I think I could get that from the Sydney Grace palette. Now, there isn't that like bright gold, but also I have that in other shades. I also have this shade in, in other palettes. I also have this shade in other palettes. I have this shade. I have that shade. Like, they're not exact, but they are ones that actually show up on me. The next Sigma palette is the Warm Neutrals. Now, if you have at least 2 eyeshadow palettes, then I know you have warm neutrals. I know you do, okay? Don't play with me. Or if you have neutrals that are cooler tone, that's because you like the cooler tones better. But these shades are in pretty much every palette that I have. Maybe except for this one here. But all the rest of them, I definitely have them in other palettes. The first one I thought of is the Bronze palette from my homegirl, Natasha. We're friends like that. These are all neutrals, bronzy. These shadows are great. They all show up on my deeper skin tone. They're pigmented, they're buttery, they're just mwah, chef's kiss. Another one that I thought of that's pretty neutral but has like a pop is this Fire Rose palette by Charlotte Tilbury. This is the only Charlotte Tilbury palette that I have, but I like that the shimmers are pretty neutral and you've got this pop of like reddish going on, a matte there. And so I find that, let's open this. Oop. This is like not easy. Okay, there we go. So I find that you could get some similar looks. Like if you look at the quad here, right above this quad, or even moving over to this quad, you can definitely get some similar looks there. Now my other homegirl, my BFF, Pat McGrath, she came out with this Voyeuristic Vixen shadow palette quad a couple months ago, and this one I think it's really nice as well because you've got that matte neutral shade and then you've got some shimmers, and I think that you could get some similar looks out of the Voyeuristic Vixen palette as opposed to the Sigma Warm Neutrals palette. So basically I was just looking for neutrals that I thought would work much better on darker skin tones than the Sigma one. And this one was a bit harder. I was digging. But that is because it's not a color story that I have a ton of. So this is the Untamed palette, and here is the palette. So you've got your greens, some like purples, there's that blue, lots of other neutrally kind of colors, but this is just not one that I'm super excited about. So it's not surprising to me that I had a hard time finding like similar or comparable shades in my little collection here. But one that I thought, especially if you want those greens, the Mini Gold palette from Natasha Denona. So if we were to put this one next to this one, you see those greens and like the goldy shimmers. I think you can get that from this palette, and that's just if you're kind of focusing on that row here. So if you're really loving that color or those couple colors there over the rest of the palette, then I think the Mini Gold is a great choice. The other one that I pulled out is the Mini Tropic. So basically I was looking for blue and gold. Oop, it's a little bit of a crumbly shade there. And this is not a favorite for a lot of people just because of like the crumbles. And I think a lot of folks don't find that it's as good quality as some of the other minis, but I'm fine with it. I think you all know that I can try to make it work with a lot of palettes. And here, you know, it's not the same, but you do have like this pale purple here. You've got that there. You've got the blue. You got the blue on that one. You've got the green shimmer. You've got the green shimmers here. So I think that, you know, if you really wanted some color and you don't want a huge palette with like a bunch of different colors, you could go with this one that has 5 shades and is often on sale, and make a look that, you know, is actually going to show up. Now, this blue shade was one that I was having a harder time sort of finding one that looks similar, but I went into my single shadows again, and this is from JD Glow, and it is the color Sapphire. So here's that. JD Glow has like large pans, and there is that. And I want to say that this is very similar to that one. And this one is like, I think on sale, it was like $6 or $7. And this little shade, if that's really what you're looking for, this is going to last you a really long time. You're probably not going to need any other blue ever. And you know what I just thought of, like back on the Natasha Denona train? I just thought of the Circle Loco palette. So I know that there are some blues in there that are really pretty. There's this one, Electric, that I really like. There's sort of this like teal, which is called Acrobat. So yeah, like if you want a palette that has a bit more boom pow than the Sigma one, then you know, here's another one that you should get when it's on sale. Now, in terms of the mattes, I was kind of having a hard time sort of finding something that had all those matte colors in there. And so I actually just went to look for matte palettes that I have. The first one that I have is the dark matte from Viseart. And let's see if I can open it. So, if you look at this dark matte and you look at this, how can we make this work? And you look at this one from Sigma, there are some similar colors here in terms of the color story of mattes that are in the palette. So again, not the exact dupes, but you know, you can make it work. I had also looked at the Cool mattes to sort of see if that would have any similar shades, and I think it does. Like, I do want to say that some of the like purples or like taupey purple kind of shades, those are in here just like they are in here. So here are the rest of the JD Glow shades that I have, and so I was thinking like, oh, if I really want a shimmer, I can just pick something from here rather than something from here. Now these shimmers are more pigmented, the pans are bigger, like you've got similar colors here. You've got the green, you've got some pinky shimmers, you've got some like lavender shimmers, and so I would just go with one of these over a matte than the Sigma palette. The Too Faced Born This Way Natural Nudes palette. Now, I actually like this palette. I think it's a really cute palette. I think the tones, again, are right up my alley. And the only thing is, for this one, also, I do tend to have to build the shades up for the most part. And so I wanted to find some more like nude shades that would actually fit my skin tone a bit better. And again, nudes in there, then I would say the Naughty Nude is an excellent choice. So these shades are going to show up a lot better on my skin tone. You've got the marble shades, which are really cool. And if you look, you put them together, there are some similar shades in the Huda palette, and also there are some ones that are just not similar. But I think these shades and formulas are a bit more fun than the Too Faced one. The other ones that I thought of are these two Viseart Petit Pro or Petit Four palettes. This one is Chocolat. So this is like a perfect kind of nude warm tone palette for my skin. So I find that this palette is pretty similar in terms of the color story of natural nude shades, and the shimmers are really pretty and give you more than just your regular shimmer. They have some more like depth to them, and yeah, that's one. Now this palette is in English the word is raspberry. In French, which I did not take, I took many years of Spanish, but it would be framboise or framboise. Okay? Don't come for me for my French accent. Tengo un acento de español. Gracias. Okay, so here is that palette, and again, just some really pretty colors, and I want to say that the sort of pinky mauve tones are also ones that are in this palette, but these are deeper and are definitely going to show up much better than this middle part here. So I am hoping that that was somewhat helpful. As I said, these aren't necessarily like exact dupes of the palettes that have less or lighter pigment, but I think they are ones that are going to show up much better on deeper skin tones, maybe even like medium to deep and dark skin tones, as opposed to some of these palettes that I think tend to work a bit better for lighter skin tones. So what I do, if there is something that I think I like in terms of the color story, I can just go ahead and see what I have that's going to work on me. So it's kind of similar to being inspired by someone's style. Sometimes I like a style that I think is like really cute or looks good, but it's like that person's style, and so I want to make it mine. And that is what I try to do with my palettes. The other thing I want to say is, like, try some indie brand single shadows, because if there are like 1 or 2 shades in a palette that you really like, I think if you go with an indie brand, you're gonna be a bit more satisfied, because oftentimes you get more for more in the product and you're getting exactly what you're looking for. So now I hope this helps. And if you have some like shades that you think, oh, that would be a good one for this palette, or to kind of use instead of this palette that you talked about, please let me know, because I would love to have an idea of other palettes that show up, especially on darker skin tones. Now, I will say that all of these that I have, except maybe JD Glow and Sydney Grace, are higher end palettes. And I do think that there are palettes that are more affordable or drugstore priced. Elf has some really good palettes, especially their mini ones, and Milani has some awesome eyeshadows as well. And there are other brands, like even some indie brands, that have excellent pigment and show up really well. There are some brands that I don't necessarily buy from as much anymore, but you can definitely find yourself some shades or a color story that you like without being extra and spending more money. Now, I do find for me, as I'm getting older, my birthday's on the 29th of July, I find that I really like the formula much better of some of the higher end palettes. And yeah, they just kind of last a bit better for me in terms of the pigment. They just perform really well. They're pretty consistent. And so my collection has kind of morphed over the past couple of years, where some of my other palettes that I would use, I've like given to some younger folks or you know, younger family members or friends or anything like that, because I'm just finding that I'm getting more into formulas that I feel like work for me and aren't going to budge. So again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.